That's okay. You can change the screen now. Yeah.
The Daily Sketch reported, Krishna people dine out at John and Yoko's place. A photograph showed the devotees seated out of doors, taking prasadam. Lunchtime at Tittenhurst Park, stately home of John Lennon and Yoko Ono, and some of the Lennon's house guests take their places in yesterday's sunshine. The picnickers are followers of the Indian Swami, His Divine Grace Abhay Charan Bhaktivedanta. They have adopted the ways of the East, from their clothes and shaven heads right down to the Indian curry they eat with their fingers, which is all rather out of character for a place like Tittenhurst Park, which cost John 150,000 euros and covers 60 acres of most exclusive Sunny Hill near Royal Ascot Racecourse. Prabhupada and his people and John and Yoko and theirs made an odd combination. 2 days after Prabhupada's arrival at Tittenhurst, John and Yoko had flown to Canada to perform with the Plastic Ono Band at Toronto Rock and Roll revival at Varsity Stadium. In October, John and Yoko had recorded a wedding album and began working on a film, Rock and Roll Circus. And John had recorded Cold Turkey. Although John was usually shy, devotees working at the main house found him open-hearted and generous with his possessions. He invited the devotees to stay permanently at Tittenhurst and Farm. Whatever he said he would share with them. One day, Yoko and Yamuna asked Yamuna if a devotee couple could stand in for her and John on stage at a London theater. She and John had previously appeared there dressed in only a burlap bag and were supposed to make another appearance, but Yoko thought perhaps the devotee couple could take their place. The crowd, she said, might never know the difference, and even if they did, it would be a hilarious publicity stunt for the devotees. Politely declining, Yamuna explained why devotees could never do such a thing. When she told Prabhupada, he was adamant. None of his disciples would go. For days afterwards, he condemned this sensuality. John invited Prabhupada to the manor to hear his recent recording of Cold Turkey. Although such a song held little interest for Prabhupada, John whimsically wanted him to hear it. Taking the opportunity to preach to the great man of the world, Prabhupada went. Within John's main sitting room, Prabhupada sat on the couch before the fireplace. The tape was ready on the large 16-track machine that had recorded it. And as Prabhupada sat patiently, John began to work the controls. So the Daily Sketch reported how the devotees were having a picnic outside with John and Yoko. And just went on explaining how the Prabhupada was also present there with them. And how the devotees had adopted the ways of like Eastern India, from their clothes, like wearing dhotis, kurtas, and saris, and with the shaven head, to the food that they eat with their fingers. And the way that the devotees were kind of stood out from the place where they were at, because this place was all an expensive and like all elegant place, but they were there with simple clothing and just simply having a picnic outside. And Prabhupada and the John and Yoko were an odd combination, because Prabhupada is there to preach Krishna consciousness, whereas John and Yoko, they travel here and there performing music and making different rock and roll, and making a film and other things, which is it's an odd combination. And usually John, he's usually shy, but with the devotees, he's very open-hearted and generous. He said that they can stay permanently. And he said whatever he had, he said he would share with them. And then one day, Yoko asked Yamuna Mataji if a devotee couple could stand in the London theater for John and Yoko's plays. And she said, if people did notice, it would be like a whimsical and hilarious publicity stunt. But Yamuna Mataji explained that a devotee could never do such a thing. And even when Prabhupada heard it, he said none of his disciples would go. and he was I think disturbed by this statement. And then John invited Prabhupada to listen to his recent recording of cold turkey. Even though Prabhupada had no interest to listen to it, still John wanted him to hear it. So, as taking this as an opportunity to preach to John because he's has a great publicity in the world, he went. And Prabhupada sat on the couch for this fireplace while John worked the control. AJ Prabhu?
Sorry. But the machine wouldn't play. John began cursing under his breath, turning knobs and pushing buttons. Although only Pursatma had accompanied Prabhupada, two other devotees hid outside beneath the windows, listening. When they peeked in and saw John struggling with the machine, they began giggling in the shadows. Oh, Prabhupada said, so your machine is not working. Well, never mind. We have also made some recording, and we would like to play this music for your pleasure. John resigned himself to listening to Prabhupada singing, and Prabhupada was saved from the cold turkey. Prabhupada kept his visit short, and as he was leaving, he saw on the wall framed life-size photos of John and Yoko naked. He also saw black and white silhouettes of a man and a woman in various positions of sexual intercourse. On returning to his room, he commented, "It is not good for us to continue staying here." He asked Mukunda to find him an apartment in London. The Berry Place renovations were still incomplete, and Prabhupada said he preferred to be in the city so that he could oversee the work. The natural setting of Tittenhurst was pleasant, but Prabhupada's host way of life and his were incompatible. One day, John and Yoko, dressed in black, came to visit Prabhupada. Acknowledging him to be a great yogi with mystic powers, they asked him to use his powers to arrange with Krishna that they should be reunited after death. Prabhupada was disappointed. "This is not my business," he said. "Krishna provides you with life, and he takes it away in the form of death. It is impossible that you can be united after death. When you go back home, back to Godhead, you can be united with Krishna. But husband and wife, this is simply a mundane relationship. It ends with the body at the time of death. You cannot pick up this kind of relationship again after death." So as you know, it's just becoming abundantly clear to Prabhupada and that, you know, living at John Lennon's house just wasn't a good fit, right? They're too incompatible. Between seeing, you know, the naked pictures of John and Yoko hanging on the wall, which I assume it's like a picture I've seen before. It's pretty famous pictures of those two together. But and you know, the silhouettes of people in different sexual positions. He said, "You know what? I need to get out of here." So he told one of the devotees to find him an apartment in London. And then John and Yoko showed up one day all dressed in black and finally acknowledging him as to have mystic powers and be a great yogi. They asked him if he could ensure that they would be together after their death. And Prabhupada was bummed out, and he's like, he's like, "You guys don't really get it. You know, your marriage is mundane. These roles of husband and wife end at the time of death. Maybe when you go back to Godhead, you can be reunited with Krishna, but you can't pick up, a marriage after death."
Second group.
Hare Krishna. At the end of the estate lived a bricklayer and his wife in a small neglected Georgian house. Hired by John to build a recording studio on the property, the bricklayer had only recently moved to Tittenhurst. A tough, burly man, he never spoke to the devotees until one day he asked several of them if they believed in ghosts. "Oh yes," Kulashekara said. "Prabhupada says there are ghosts." "I don't believe," the bricklayer said. "My wife is having dreams, but I don't believe in ghosts." The bricklayer's wife revealed that both she and her husband had been hearing something at night. Last night they had gone running to John Lennon's house, terrified, complaining of sounds, chains rattling, boot heels pounding, and the noise of something like a body being dragged across the floor. The bricklayer had seen his wife violently shaken by the shoulders, although no one else was there. When the devotees told Prabhupada, he said, "You tell John Lennon that if he wants, we can get rid of this ghost." Mukunda relayed the message, but John had already invited his friend, a white witch, to come and exorcise the ghost. The warlock visited the bricklayer's cottage, and a few devotees tagged along. Over the fireplace in the main room, they found a carving of a person with a ghost coming out of his forehead, and on the opposite wall, Mahogany runes. These are ancient witch runes, the warlock said, shaking his head. I can't do anything here. When John asked the devotees to try their method, Prabhupada directed them. At the bricklayer's cottage, they should sprinkle water offered to Krishna in the doorways, blow conch shells, and then have kirtan. A group of devotees went, and Kulashekara led the kirtan. After an hour of chanting, Kulashekara felt a great release of pressure within the room, and the kirtan became ecstatic. The devotees returned to their engagements, assuring John that the ghost would not return, and the bricklayer and his wife moved in again. So here, basically, there was a bricklayer who lived in the same estate in a small house, and he was hired by John to build a recording studio, and he has recently moved into this house. He was tough. He never spoke to the devotees, and one day he asked if they believed in ghosts, and Kulashekara said yes. And the bricklayer mentions that his wife is having dreams, but he doesn't believe in ghosts. And he tells the experience of his wife, where she heard the sounds of chains rattling, and as if like somebody was there in the house when she was violently shaken. But when he saw, there was no one there. So when the devotees told Prabhupada said, asked them to tell John Lennon that if he wants, they can get rid of the ghost. Mukunda relayed the message, but John already invited the witch friend to exorcise the ghost. And when that person came to the bricklayer's cottage, she basically looked at the fireplace. She looked at the house, and basically she just gave up, saying that she cannot do anything here. And basically that person left. And when John asked the devotees to try their method, Prabhupada gave them directions. So few devotees went. They offered water offered to Krishna in the doorways. They blew conch shells, and they had kirtan. And Kulashekara led the kirtan, and after an hour of chanting, Kulashekara felt that a great release of pressure within the room, and the kirtan became ecstatic. So, and the devotees mentioned to John that the ghost will not return, and the bricklayer and his wife moved in again.
Nipa Mataji.
The next morning, Prabhupada passed the old cottage on his walk. So, how is the ghost? He asked. No news, Prabhupada, Kulashekara replied. Following morning, Prabhupada again asked, how's the ghost? Would they live to have him back? Would they like to have him back? Years ago in India, Prabhupada said when he was running his chemical business, he had detected ghosts in the building at night. What did you do? One of the devotees asked. I simply chanted Hare Krishna and the ghost would go away. Prabhupada then opened his eyes wide and gestured with both hands, mimicking the frightened workers in the plant who had come running to him. Babaji, Babaji, there is ghost, the devotees laughed. Actually, Prabhupada said there are many ghosts here, especially over by the stable areas. They are attached to this place, but they will not harm you if you just chant Hare Krishna. Prabhupada was anxious to leave Tittenhurst by the late October. Some of the devotees had moved to Bury Place. Prabhupada no longer had any business at Tittenhurst. Mr. Lennon was an influential person who had seemed interested in Krishna, but now there was no point in Prabhupada staying on at this estate. Yoko and her ex-husband Dan, now John's manager, was also pressing John to be rid of the devotees. Dan complained that the devotees were trying to take over the place. The devotees, on the other hand, complained to John that Dan and Yoko were misinterpreting them. On one side were Dan and Yoko, on the other the devotees. John was in the middle. He had to choose. John told Mikunda that as far as he was concerned, He got along fine with the devotees, but the people around him were having difficulty. He would give the devotees a couple more weeks to move to their new temple in the city. The devotees were already in the process of moving to Buri Place, and Mukunda had found an apartment for Prabhupada a short drive from the temple. In a few days, everything would be ready for Prabhupada to move. So the next morning, Prabhupada was taking a walk and past the old cottage, and he asked if there is how's the ghost, and Kulashekara replied no news about the ghost, and Prabhupada again confirmed like how's the ghost, would they like to have him back. And years ago in India, Prabhupada said when he had a chemical business, he detected many ghosts in the building at night, and one of the devotees asked, then what do you do in that case? And Prabhupada replied, simply chant Hare Krishna and ghosts would go away. And Prabhupada opened his eyes and gestured with both hands, mimicking the frightened workers. And workers in the plant had come running to him saying, Babaji, there is ghost. And actually, Prabhupada said there are many ghosts, they are attached, but they don't harm if you chant Hare Krishna. Prabhupada was anxious to leave Tittenhurst, but by late October, some of the devotees had moved to Buri Place. And since Prabhupada no longer had any business left, uh, business at the Tittenhurst, so that's why he was leaving. Mr. Lennon was an influential person and who was interested in the Krishna consciousness, but there was no point in Prabhupada staying in the estate. Yoko and her ex-husband Dan were now John's manager, who were also pressing John to kind of be rid of the devotees. Dan complained that the devotees were kind of taking the place. So there was like two groups now. On one side there was Dan and Yoko. On the other side there was devotees, and John was in the middle, so he had to choose. And John went on to Prabhupada, and he did I finish here? Oh yeah, John told Mekamba.
Yeah, I think you finished. Yeah. Prashanti Mataji.
On the day Prabhupada left Tittenhurst, he stopped at the car and said, I want to say goodbye to the few friends first. He then took a last walk through the grounds, giving careful attention to the trees, sometimes touching their leaves just as on his morning walks. Then he left. The next day, a severe storm swept through the Tittenhurst estate, breaking windows and uprooting trees. November 3rd, 1969, Prabhupada moved into his furnished apartment on Baker Street, a 10-minute drive from the Buri Place temple. After 2 months in London, he was anxious to see his temple open, and Shyam Sundara was working hard, although progressing slowly. For the temple's interior, Shyam Sundara had an artistic concept taken from photographs he had seen of the Ajanta caves, South Indian temples with walls and ceilings of carved stone. His inspiration was to produce a similar effect using California redwood. He and Mukunda had shipped to England a year ago. On first hearing on first hearing the plans, Prabhupada had asked, why make it so artistic? But Shyam Sundara had been so set on the idea that Prabhupada had permitted him. With the ceiling partly finished, there was no turning back. Shyamasundara toiled day and night, yet each day the temple design seemed to grow more elaborate, with the walls and floor fashioned of solid redwood, and the ceiling lined with redwood arches. Shyamsundara took great care to see that each piece fit exactly into place. As Shyamsundara inched along, devotees joked that the room looked like an upside down boat. But Prabhupada encouraged him, telling him it was very beautiful. Prabhupada often allowed his disciples to work as they liked. He reasoned that they were raising the money and could spend it in Krishna's service as they pleased. He also did not care to interfere in every detail of a disciple's service, especially when that disciple was strong headed and has ideas that were not harmful or obstructive. All Prabhupada's disciples were ultimately under his absolute decision, but he was often lenient, 80% lenient, he would sometimes say. Shamsundara particularly thrived on having his own big projects. He had arranged for Mantra rock dance in San Francisco, built the first Rath Yatra carts, established a friendship with George Harrison, and now he was designing a temple. Prabhupada allowed it, watchfully like a father. On the day Prabhupada was about to leave Tottenhurst, he stopped the car and wanted to say goodbye to few friends, as if he goes into the, as if he is going to his morning walk. He walked through the grounds and gave a careful attention to the trees, and he even touched the leaves of some trees. And then he left. And the next day, a severe storm swept the estate, breaking windows and uprooting the trees. On November 3rd, 1969, Prabhupada moved into the apartment on Baker Street. It is a 10-minute drive to the temple. After 2 months in London, they were working on opening the temple now. Um, whereas Shyam Sundara is working hard and progressing very slowly because he wants to incorporate his artistic ideas into the construction of the temple. Though Prabhupada was not so keen on making it so artistic, but he was so lenient uh, and let Shyam Sundara work on his concept. They shipped redwood, California redwood, 1 year ago, and they are working on it with the inspiration of the Ajanta caves of India. And Sham Sundara was progressing very slowly, and Prabhupada encouraged him, and the remaining devotees said that it was looking like an upside down boat, but Prabhupada encouraged him. And then it also explains that Prabhupada is very lenient towards his disciples as long as their ideas are not harmful or obstructing, as long as they were doing Krishna service. 80% of the time he was lenient. And Shyam Sundaram Shyam Sundara is the architect behind the temple, and also he established the friendship with George Harrison, and he is the main person behind the arrangements of Mantra rock dance in San Francisco. So Prabhupada allowed it, watchfully like a father.
Consulting the Vedic calendar, Prabhupada chose December 14 for the temple opening celebration. And despite predictions from Shyamsundara and others that the deadline would be impossible to meet, Prabhupada ordered invitations printed immediately. The devotees had tremendous work to do and little time. Not only did they have the temple to complete, but also Prabhupada's quarters on the second floor and the kitchen in the basement. Faced with their tight deadline, they worked harder. As Prabhupada was anxious about the temple opening, he was also anxious about publishing the first volume of Krishna, but he had no money. According to printer's estimates, the book would cost about $19,000. Prabhupada told Shyamsundara to ask his friend George for a donation. Shyamsundara, who had always been careful not to ask George for money, was hesitant, but Prabhupada insisted and Shyamsundara gave in. George agreed, but regretted it afterward. Then Shyamsundara began to feel sorry. After all, he did not really wanted to ask George, and George had not really wanted to be asked. When Prabhupada heard of this, he invited George to see him. George told Prabhupada that every day people were asking him for this money. But when Prabhupada explained the importance of the Krishna book and how George's donation would be devotional service to Krishna, George dismissed his regrets. He also agreed to write a foreword to the volume. George, I did not really think I was qualified to write the foreword to Prabhupada's book, but one way of looking at it is because I am known, it would help. But from the other point of view, it could really hinder because not everyone wants to listen or to believe what I say. There are a lot of people who would be put off just because I'm saying it. I mean, if I picked up a book on Krishna and the foreword was written by a Frank Zappa or somebody like that, I would think, God, maybe I did not want to know about it. So I thought that although he asked me, maybe Prabhupada did not really want me to write the forward, but it was one of those things I could not get out of. Everybody had their minds made up. You are writing the forward, and that's it. So I just did it. When Srila Prabhupada asked to watch the moon landing, the devotees rented a television and placed it in Prabhupada's living room. Prabhupada took his massage as usual and sitting in a chair before the television. Purushottama announced, well, Prabhupada, it's about time. So I will turn on the television and soon we'll be getting some pictures from the astronauts out in space. So Prabhupada has decided and announced that on December 14 will be the good day for the temple opening celebration, and other devotees like Syam Sundar and others, they predicted that it's a very tight deadline and it cannot be that deadline cannot be met, but still Prabhupada insisted on it and asked the invitations to be printed immediately. And so everyone know that it is like a tremendous work to do and they have very little time, but still they worked harder to meet the tight deadline. And also Prabhupada's answers about the temple opening and also about the printing of the first volume of Krishna, but he did not have any money. So he according to the estimates of the printers, the book will cost around $19,000. And so Prabhupada asked Syam Sundara to check with his friend George for a donation. So initially, like Syam Sundara was really not interested to check with George for any money, and he was initially bit hesitant. But still, since Prabhupada asked him to do, so he continued to check with him. And George agreed in the beginning, but then he regretted and he was not ready to bear the donation for printing the books. So this message was conveyed to Prabhupada, and even Syam Sundara was feeling regret, he felt like he should not have asked him. Then Prabhupada, after hearing this message, he invited George to meet him, and he was explaining about the book and the donation, and George was saying that like people used to check with him for money, but he was not interested. And Prabhupada mentioned it will be a good devotional service, making a donation for printing the book, and George agreed finally. And also Prabhupada requested George to write a foreword in the book that will be published. So for that, George was initially not convinced, because he thought that a person like him, if he's writing a book, it will not make the people to give a good inspiration for studying the book. But finally, he gave the foreword in the invite. And also, when Prabhupada was asked to watch the moon landing, the devotees rented a television and they put it on the Prabhupada's living room. And even the devotees mentioned that it is when the time of the landing was happening. So they were mentioning to Prabhupada that we will switch on the TV so that we can get their pictures from the astronauts.
How merciful Prabhupada just gave a little donation. Not a little donation, but he is now glorified up to now, and he'll be glorified for thousands of years. Now everybody will forget everything, but George Harrison will be remembered, and all these people who are on the in a book will be remembered. And especially George's name in Krishna book, he is fortunate, and it's like a competition. The more
Your mic's going in and out again.
Going in and out? Yeah,
like not lagging, like the volume's going up and down.
Okay. Maybe there's something going on at the house also. They're using something. So the point is, the more one serves Krishna, and Krishna also glorifies and serves the devotees. That's the beauty of it. There's a competition between devotees and Lord Krishna in the service. So George Harrison, he did something a little bit, but that time it is a big thing for him to do. And because he did, Krishna also allowed his name to be put in Krishna book. That's a very amazing um, benediction. No. Okay. Okay. Uh, a reporter was speaking from Cape Canaveral, Florida. Is it okay? My voice is clear now, a little better. Okay. A reporter was speaking from Cape Canaveral, Florida. We are just about to get the first pictures of this historic occasion. The picture appeared fuzzy, then cleared. The spacecraft had landed on the moon. As the astronauts emerged from the ship, very slowly eased themselves down onto the moon's surface. Purushottama was in ecstasy. Isn't it? Purushottama was already, very favorable for this. So Purushottama was in ecstasy. Dhananjay, I was attempting to massage Prabhupada's head and at the same time watch the program. All of a sudden, as the man were landing, Prabhupada motioned for me to sit in front of him. So I came around. As soon as I sat down, Prabhupada started to massage my head. I was quite embarrassed. You have forgotten how to massage properly, he asked. This is how you do it. He massaged my head for about 2 minutes because he was watching and massaging both he was doing together. Then I stood behind Prabhupada and again began massaging his head. By this time, the astronauts were moving across the landscape. They had gotten out their little American flag and were sticking it on the ground and were jumping up and down. Congratulations, everyone. American flag is still uh, in moon now at this time. Um, Apparently, they were defying gravity because every time they jumped up, they would float through the air and then gently land again. There was a lot of jubilation and sounds from them. So Purushottama Prabhupada asked, they have come to the moon. Yes, Prabhupada, Purushottama said excitedly. They've landed on the moon. Prabhupada smiled. Dhananjaya, again, Prabhupada motioned me to the front. I moved around and sat down. I thought he wanted me to massage him from the front. But again, he put his hands on my head and massaged. He said, can't you learn this simple thing, massaging my head? I had been watching the television and not giving my full attention to my service. I tried again. But again, Prabhupada said, you still don't know how to do this. I said, well, Prabhupada, I'm trying by my hardest. He laughed and said, that's all right, continue. Prabhupada asked Purushottama, so what can you see? They're exploring the moon's surface, he said. So what is there? Well, it looks like they have landed inside a crater somewhere, and the ground is sandy with some rocks. Oh, look, they are showing some shadows from some of the rocks that are lying around. That's all you can see. There are no people, there are no trees, there are no rivers, there are no buildings. No, Purushottam replied, the moon is barren. They have not landed on the moon, Prabhupada said empathetically. This is not the moon. This is not the moon. Later, when Malati brought in Prabhupada's lunch, he said, what Malati has done, she has made this little khichdi for Krishna, and that is far greater than what they have done. So this is the situation. The scene is going to be on television from Florida. So they're announcing that, is what you will see now, how people are landing in the moon. And it is showing in the slow motion. And from Vedic way, it is illogical to slow motion. Why they have to, so as if like gravity is not there. According to Shastra, they imitate the pretending all these things. So Prabhupada was, Purushottam was very excited to see that the achievement they have done and this and that. But Prabhupada was saying, he said that, no, they didn't. They didn't land. This is not the moon. Purushottam is saying, oh, moon is a barren land. Nothing is there, just sand and rocks, and that's it. Prabhupada said, that's not what the moon, no trees, no water, no rivers, nothing. No, that's not. At the same time, Prabhupada was making, a little jolly with Dhananjay. You don't know how to massage. I thought so much. Dhananjay is getting distracted again and again. So Prabhupada was again and again reminding how to do the massage. Anyway, then Prabhupada's point is, here is Malati, who offered a little khichdi to Prabhupada, to Krishna. And she has the, Malati has done, she has made it this is far greater than what they have done by saying they have landed on moon. Anyway, because you landed on moon, even if you do, just seeing a rock and sand. So that's his point. Okay, AJ.
Even though Prabhupada's quarters were incomplete and temple renovation made Seven Barry Place noisy and hectic, Prabhupada decided to move in. I'm not attached to a comfortable apartment, he said. My attachment is to living in the association of devotees. He was moving into the temple at a time when the record sales were low and the devotees were having to purchase supplies piecemeal whenever they got money. Yet with Prabhupada living with them and supervising their work, they were satisfied. Tamala Krishna arrived from Los Angeles, and in addition to supervising much of the construction, he began taking the devotees out daily to chant on the streets and sell Back to Godhead magazines. Yamuna was sewing curtains from morning until night. Isana, Shamasundra, and others were working every possible hour on the renovation, and every day Prabhupada would walk through the building to see the progress. With only 1 week left until the opening, Shamasundra still labored on the temple ceiling. He had not even begun the altar. Again, the other devotees complained to Prabhupada that Shamasundra was too slow, but Prabhupada replied, he wants to make it artistic, let him do it. Shamasundra, this time on his own, asked George for a donation for an altar. George gave 2,000 pounds, and Shamasundra picked out a slab of golden Sienna marble and 2 slabs of red marble. Although Prabhupada had a pair of 17-inch carved wood deities of Radha and Krishna, he didn't plan to use them. And the size of the altar Shamasundra was building clearly required larger deities. One day, a Mr. Doyle phoned representing a large London Hindu society. He had heard the devotees wanted Radha Krishna deities, and he had a pair he would donate. When Prabhupada heard the news, he sent Tamala Krishna, Mukunda, and Shamasundra to Mr. Doyle's home to see the deities. Radha and Krishna were white marble and stood about 3 feet high. Never before had the devotees seen such large deities, and they offered obeisances. When they returned to the temple and told Prabhupada, he said, "Take me there at once." Srila Prabhupada, accompanied by Shamasundra, Mukunda, and Tamala Krishna, arrived by van at Mr. Doyle's home. Prabhupada entered the living room and sat down. The deities, covered by a cloth, stood on a table in the corner. Tamala Krishna was about to unveil them when Prabhupada checked him. "No, that's all right." Prabhupada sat and spoke with Mr. Doyle, asking him about his work and where he had come from in India. And he met Mr. Doyle's family, and Prabhupada and his host chatted while the devotees listened. "Swamiji," Mr. Doyle said, "I want to show you my deities." "Yes," Prabhupada replied, "I will see them after some time." Prabhupada began to speak about his Krishna consciousness mission, and after a while, Mr. Doyle again requested, "Please take a look at these deities." And with that, he walked over and unveiled Radha and Krishna. "Oh yes," Prabhupada said, folding his hands respectfully. Mr. Doyle explained he had ordered the deities from India for his own use, but in transit, a tiny piece of Radharani's finger had chipped off. Therefore, according to Hindu tradition, the deities cannot be installed. Tamala Krishna, Prabhupada said, "See how heavy those deities are." Tamala Krishna, placing one hand at Radharani's base and the other around her shoulder, lifted her. "Not so heavy," he said. Shamasundra, "See how heavy is Krishna." The deities were actually heavy for one man to carry, but the devotees understood Prabhupada's intention. "Not bad," Shamasundra said, holding Krishna a few inches off the table. "Yes," Prabhupada said conclusively, "I think they're all right. Let us take them. We have our own van." And suddenly Prabhupada was leaving, with his disciples following, carefully carrying Radha and Krishna. Prabhupada thanks Mr. Doyle. "But Swamiji," protested Mr. Doyle, who was not prepared for this sudden exit. "We will arrange to bring them. Our society will bring them." But Prabhupada was already out the door and leading his men to the van. So, yeah.
Prabhupada
So-
kidnapped.
Yeah. So they were still, working on the temple, and they were, Shamasundra was not moving very quickly, and some of the other devotees were getting a little fed up with how slow he was, and he was stuck on the ceiling trying to get the ceiling right, and hadn't even begun the altar. But he got a donation from George Harrison to get some nice marble slabs to build the altar. They did have deities already, but they were going to be very small compared to the massive altar that he was building. So it lucks out that this Mr. Doyle had called and said, I have, Radha and Krishna deities at my home that you can have. So the devotees went down and checked them out, and they saw them, and they came back, and they told Prabhupada, and Prabhupada's like, yeah, let's go, take me immediately. So they rushed back over to Mr. Doyle's house, and the deities were covered by a cloth, and when Tamala Krishna was about to pull the cloth off, Prabhupada's like, no, not yet. And so he sat and talked with Mr. Doyle's family, and Mr. Doyle's like, okay, now can I show you? And Prabhupada again was like, no, not yet, not ready. In a little bit. And,
As if not much interest.
Yeah, he's like, no big deal. And then he was telling Mr. Doyle again about the deities, and finally he's like, you know what, I'm going to show you. So he pulls the cover off of them, and Prabhupada was very, very happy to see it, to see them both, and so he sends Tamal Krishna to see how heavy it is, and then sends Shamasundra to see how heavy Krishna is, and they say, yeah, we can lift them, and Prabhupada's like, all right, let's go. And Mr. Doyle had told him, though, the reason they couldn't use them is because Radharani's finger had chipped in shipping, and because of that, that imperfection means they couldn't use them for their purposes. But Prabhupada didn't seem to mind, and he was like, all right, we're done. Load them up in the van and let's go. And Mr. Doyle tried to stop him. He wanted, for whatever reason, he wanted this, his society to bring them to the temple. But Prabhupada was like, nah, and bailed on him. So, and left at that point. So why do you think Prabhupada was like saying like, yeah, we don't need to see him yet. We can wait. Like I wonder what his intention was there, what his thought process was.
First of all, this is, see, Prabhupada is opening a temple and there is no deities, first of all,
Yeah.
How everything, Prabhupada sees Krishna's arrangement. Before a man changes his mind, let's go out. Prabhupada didn't want to bargain, see, talk, people always can change the mind. So let's get out from this place, then we will think about it. At least we got very expertly engaged. Sometimes people keep on dragging. They can get into so many issues because of that. So it's like, now let's see what comes further. What is Mr. Doyle's point?
Yes, Prabhupada said. But Swamiji, protested Mr. Doyle, who was not prepared for this sudden exit. Please, we will arrange to bring them. Our society will bring them. But Prabhupada was already out the door and leading his men to the van. Please wait, Mr. Doyle persisted. We have to fix them first. Then you can take them. We have an expert man, Prabhupada said. He can fix these things. Prabhupada was assuring Mr. Doyle at the same time directing his disciples. He opened the door of the van and Shamasundar and Tamal Krishna slowly entered, cautiously setting Radha and Krishna within. Tamal Krishna knelt in the back to hold the deity secure, while Shamasundar got into the driver's seat. Now drive, Prabhupada said, and off they went, with Prabhupada smiling from the window to Mr. Doyle and his family, who stood together on the curb. Shamasundar had driven but a few blocks when Prabhupada asked him to stop the van. Turning around in his seat, Prabhupada began offering prayers. Govinda Mahadipurusham Kamaham Vijaya.
Now Prabhupada is making offering prayers. Now he's after secluded place.
He
Yeah.
looked long at Krishna, who was white with a slight bluish cast, and at the exquisite white Radharani by his side. Krishna is so kind, he said. He has come like this. Then he had Shamasundar continue driving slowly back to temple. Carefully, Prabhupada supervised his disciples carrying the deities up to the second floor. The devotees were astounded and delighted to see Prabhupada in such an animated, intense state, bringing Radha and Krishna to the temple. He had the deities placed in a curtained-off section of his own room, and then he sat at his desk. Prabhupada smiled. Krishna has played a great trick. In the Mahabharata also, he said there are incidents where Krishna plays tricks. One such trick was Krishna agreeing to be on the side of the general he saw first in the morning. The two opposing generals, Arjuna and Duryodhana, had both come to Krishna's tent early in the morning as Krishna slept. They had agreed that one of them would stand at Krishna's head and the other at Krishna's feet, and they would wait until Krishna woke. Duryodhana chose to stand by Krishna's head, while Arjuna chose his feet. Krishna woke and saw Arjuna. Should I continue?
Yeah.
That was one great trick that was played by Krishna, Prabhupada said. Similarly, this is a great trick. He told how Krishna had also tricked Mother Yashoda, and she had tried to discipline Krishna. He had run away, and she had run after him, caught him, and tried to tie him with ropes. But every time she came with more rope. Prabhupada said it was just a little too short. Krishna can play any kind of trick. Another such trick has been played. They have made so much effort to bring these deities here, thinking they will be for their Hindu center, but all the time Krishna wanted to come here. So this chip on the deity's hand is just Krishna's trick, and we have caught them.
Mm.
So Prabhupada tells Shamsundar Prabhu and Tamakrishna Prabhu to put the deities in the car, and he's urging them to go faster and faster. And then as they all get into the car, Prabhupada says that we will take care and we will take them. But Mr. Doyal is saying that, wait, we have to fix them first. But Prabhupada says that they have an extra man. And he was assuring Mr. Doyle, and as they all sat inside the car, Prabhupada tells him to drive. And smiling from the window to Mr. Doyle's family. And then after they had driven a few blocks, Prabhupada asked him to stop the van. And here he starts reciting prayers and actually looking at the deities. He started singing the Govinda Madi Purusha prayer. And he looked how Krishna was a slightly bluish color or cast, and Radharani was a white color. And he said, Krishna is so kind of how he has come. And Shamsundar Prabhu slowly drives back to temple. And then they arrive, and Prabhupada supervises on carrying the deities up to the second floor. And the devotees were all delighted and astounded by seeing these deities here. And Prabhupada smiles, saying, Krishna has played a great trick to come to their temple. He explains in Mahabharata how Krishna had tricked Duryodhana had a trick in Mahabharata where Krishna said that he'll be on the side of the general he saw first in the morning. So when Arjuna and Duryodhana came, Duryodhana stood near Krishna's head, and Arjuna sat near his feet. So when Krishna woke up, his eyes would go straight ahead where Arjuna was, which was at his feet. And so he went on Pandava's side. And then he also played trick with Mother Yashoda, where he had stolen butter, and then Mother Yashoda came to discipline Krishna. And when she caught him, she tried to tie him with the ropes. But every time she came with more and more ropes, it would always be just a little too short. The same way, just how Mr. Doyal had taken so much effort to bring these deities, thinking that they'll be there for their Hindu center, Krishna wanted to come to their temple, and the chip on the deity's hand is just a trick. And yeah.
Mm. Nipa?
Prabhupada, Mukunda said, you kidnapped Krishna. Yes, Prabhupada said. Once I was in the bank and the manager had some scheme, but I foiled his scheme. So he said to me, you should have been a politician. Mr. Day, you should have been a politician. Then he became grave and asked the devotees not to talk about the incident. Many people would not understand how he could install a chip deity. The devotees agreed to keep the secret, but they had no doubt that Prabhupada's love for Krishna was transcendental to Hindu customs. Radha and Krishna had come to London on Prabhupada's desire. How do you dress big deities like this? Yamuna asked. They already have clothes on, Prabhupada said. You bring me some cloth. What kind of cloth, Prabhupada? What should the clothes look like? Like in the pictures, he replied. Well, there are so many different pictures, she said. Sometimes Krishna has a ruffled skirt on, and sometimes he has a dhoti on, and sometimes he has a big crown on. Krishna looks very beautiful and saffron, Prabhupada said. You so you bring me some silk dhotis in yellow and saffron color. Yamuna collected 6 silk saris with silver and gold borders. Prabhupada indicated the design he wanted and told Yamuna how to arrange the crowns. With only a few days remaining before the installation ceremony, Yamuna began working almost continuously at her sewing machine. Several times a day, Prabhupada would come to see her progress. So here, Mukunda says that to Prabhupada, you have kidnapped Krishna, and Prabhupada replies yes, and narrates that one time he was in the bank and manager had a scheme. So he said to Mr. Day that, but he foiled his scheme. So he said that he should have been politician, and Prabhupada had laughed at that point. He became grave and asked the devotees to not to talk about the incident. The devotees agreed to keep the secret, but they had no doubt that Prabhupada's love for Krishna was transcendental. And Radha and Krishna had many people would not understand how he could install a chipped deities, and so the devotees agreed to keep his secret. And Prabhupada there's no doubt that Prabhupada's love for Krishna was transcendental, and Radha Krishna and Krishna had come to London on Prabhupada's desire. And Yamuna asked, how do you address big deities like that? They already have clothes on. So Prabhupada said, you can bring me some cloth. And then Yamuna asked, what kind of clothes? Because in every picture it's with different kind of clothes. So sometimes it's like Krishna has ruffled skirt, sometimes it's dhoti, and he has a big crown. So Krishna looks very beautiful in saffron color. That's what Prabhupada said. So you bring me saffron colored dhotis and silk. That's what he asked. And Yamuna collected silk, 6 silk saris which had like silver and gold borders. And Prabhupada indicated the design he wanted. And and told Yamuna how to arrange the crowns. With only few days for the installation ceremony remaining, Yamuna began to work continuously on her sewing machine. Several times Prabhupada would come to see her progress. Shall I continue reading?
Is not there?
Yeah, we were not able to hear. Shyam Sundar had completed most of the altar except for Lord Jagannath's altar and the canopy over Radha and Krishna's throne. Both the canopy and Lord Jagannath's altar would be supported by 4 heavy wooden columns more than 6 feet high. 2 rear columns would hold a marble slab for the Jagannath deities to stand on, and 2 front columns were now supporting Radha and Krishna's large velvet canopy. The columns were big and heavy. Shyam Sundar called them elephant leg columns. The columns now stood in place on the altar, although Shyam Sundar hadn't had a chance to secure them. The day before the installation, Shyam Sundar collapsed upstairs in exhaustion. On opening day, many guests, Indians especially, crowded the temple, responding to flyers and advertisements. Apple Records had supplied a professional florist who had decorated the room with floral arrangements. A BBC television crew was on hand to videotape the ceremony, while most of the devotees held kirtan. Prabhupada, behind a curtain at the other end of the temple, bathed Radha and Krishna. The plan was that after bathing ceremony, the deities would be placed on the altar and Yamuna would dress them. Once they were dressed and enthroned, the curtain would open for all the guests to behold Sri Radha and Krishna. Prabhupada would lecture, and then everyone would feast. But because of Shyam Sundara's oversight, the installation almost became a disaster. Prabhupada had finished bathing the deities and they had been placed on the marble altar when suddenly the elephant leg columns tottered. The canopy above the deities began to collapse. Prabhupada, seeing the danger, jumped onto the altar and seized the heavy columns in a split second. With great strength, he held the two front pillars in place. "Get this out of here," he shouted. While Prabhupada's arms protected the deities, the men removed the canopy, and then two men at a time carried each of the pillars away. The deities remained unharmed. So, in preparation for the altar, Shamsundara had completed everything. He basically used big wooden columns, two in the front and two in the back, which were the base for the canopy. So the columns were big and heavy, and Shamsundara basically he did not secure them. He just placed them, and looks like it was this oversight that he forgot. And the day before the installation, he collapsed upstairs in exhaustion. So looks like this was left off. And the opening day, many Indians came to the temple. They saw the advertisements and the flyers. Apple Records had helped in the decorations by supplying a florist, and a BBC television crew was videotaping the whole ceremony. Well, devotees were having a kirtan. Prabhupada was behind the curtain. He was bathing Radha and Krishna. And after the bathing ceremony, the deities would be placed on the altar, and Yamuna would dress them. And once they were dressed, the curtain would open, and for all the guests to take the darshan of Radha and Krishna. They would lecture and they would feast. And because of Shamsundara's oversight that he did not secure the four pillars, the installation almost became a disaster. Prabhupada finished the bathing the deities, and they had been placed on the marble altar, when suddenly the elephant leg columns they tottered, and the canopy began to collapse. Prabhupada, seeing the danger, he jumped on the altar and he seized those heavy columns, and he also held those front two pillars in place, so that way the canopy won't fall, and he protected the deities. And the men they came and removed the canopy, and they carried the pillars away, so the deities were secured.
Prasanthi?
While Prabhupada was behind the curtain rescuing Radha and Krishna, on the other side of the curtain, guests and reporters awaited the unveiling of the deities. Unaware of the mishap, the guests saw only men emerging from behind the curtain carrying large pillars and a canopy. The BBC camera crew began filming the canopy and pillars as they appeared from behind the curtain, taking them to be part of the ceremonial procession. The few devotees behind
This
the
is the
curtain,
funny.
yeah,
Because you don't know, everything is new. You think that's part of the ceremony. Okay, go ahead.
the few devotees behind the curtain with Prabhupada were amazed. But there was no time now for apologies or appreciations. Yamuna addressed the deities, Prabhupada hurrying her. When at last everything was ready, Prabhupada opened the main curtain, revealing the graceful forms of Lord Krishna and Radharani to the temple full of guests. A devotee began to offer arati, while Prabhupada, wearing a saffron chadara and a garland of carnations, stood to one side, reverentially looking upon Radha and Krishna as their worshipper and protector. This was the culmination of months of effort. Actually, years of planning had preceded this auspicious occasion. 100 years before, Bhaktivinoda Thakura had hoped for the day when Krishna consciousness would come to England, and Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati had also desired it. Now that an authorized temple of Radha and Krishna was preaching Krishna consciousness in London, it was a historic occasion for Gaudiya Vaishnavism. A long standing order of the previous acharyas had been fulfilled. Prabhupada had sent invitations to several of his godbrothers in India. None of them had been able to come. Of course, but at least they should have been pleased to learn that this dream of Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati had been fulfilled. While Prabhupada was bathing the deities, and the two devotees took the elephant-legged columns out of the air, and also they carried the canopy along with them. The BBC crew, not knowing the procedures of the installation of the deities, they thought that this carrying the canopy and pillars is also part of the ceremony, and they were filming those. And after that, and there was no time for apologies or appreciations. They were in a hurry for the sequence of events to be conducted. So yeah, Prabhupada hurried Yamuna to dress the deities, and then once everything was ready, Prabhupada opened the main curtain to show the graceful forms of Radha and Krishna to the room full of guests. Then Aarti was conducted, and Prabhupada had a garland and a saffron chadra, wearing a saffron chadra, and it also explains that the whole temple was a culmination of months of effort and planning that was done years ahead. It is the it is the vision of Bhakti Vinod Thakura and Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati. And then now Radha and Krishna deities are installed in London, and then now they can preach Krishna consciousness. This is a historic occasion for Gaudiya Vaishnavism. Prabhupada sent invitations to his god brothers, but they were unable to come. But surely they are very pleased with the success.
Vijayan Prabhu.
Prabhupada was 73. He had now opened 21 temples in 3 years. Recently, he had told some of his disciples that they should try to form a governing body for ISKCON to relieve him of the management and allow him to concentrate fully on presenting Krishna conscious literature. This literature could be introduced all over the world into homes, schools, and colleges for the benefit of everyone. It should be in such literature that he would live on. How much time he had left in this world, he did not know. He said, but he wanted to go on serving and trying to please his Guru Maharaja life after life. Nevertheless, despite Prabhupada's desire to retire from his active work and absorb himself in writing books, here he was installing deities in a new temple and protecting them from his disciples' carelessness. Had he not been present, the celebration would have been a disaster. So many hardworking disciples, and they still need his personal guidance. ISKCON was just beginning to grow. Prabhupada wanted to open not just 21 temples, but at least 108. His world traveling and book printing were just beginning, and like everything else, the number of disciples would increase. The prestige of his movement would increase, and with it, opposition from the atheist Krishna consciousness was growing, and Prabhupada was in the forefront. All around, I see bright, he said. That's the glory of Krishna. He saw himself as a servant of his spiritual master. The bright future was in Krishna's hands. Prabhupada called for Shyam Sundara. Although Prabhupada was angry at first because of the near disaster on the altar, he admitted that his disciples had done their best. The temple was beautiful. He told Shyam Sundara he liked it. He then asked that a sign be placed out of with gold letters on a blue background. So this shows about the age and the health condition of Prabhupada. So it looks like Prabhupada was like 73 years old, and in this age he had opened like 21 temples in these 3 years. And also he was looking, he instructed his disciples to form a governing body for ISKCON so that he will be relieved from the management and he can focus on the Krishna conscious literature. And he strongly believed that the literature could be introduced all over the world in all the home schools and colleges, and it will benefit everyone. Also, he was not sure like how long he has the time in this world, but he wanted to serve and praise his Guru Maharaj life after life. And also, like even though Prabhupada has the desire to retire from the active work and to concentrate on writing books, but still here he was installing the deities and protecting from disciples' carelessness. So here, if he is not present in this moment, it would have been a disaster. So lot of devotees still need his personal guidance. So ISKCON was just started to begin with, but its purpose or its goal is not just for these 21 temples. He was planning to start at least 108 temples, and he would travel and concentrate on printing the books. And he also thought that the prestige of the movements will rise, and even if there is an opposition from the atheist, Krishna consciousness was growing with Prabhupada in the forefront. And also he felt that he is the servant of the spiritual master, and there was a bright future with in the hands of Krishna. And Prabhupada, after the event has completed, he called for Shyamsundara, and although he was angry because of the near disaster on the altar, he admitted that the disciples put their best efforts, and the temple was beautiful. So he mentioned that he really liked all the efforts on the temple, and he asked to put a signboard with golden letters on blue background.
Thank you. So maybe with this we'll end. Radha Krishna Temple. This temple was constructed with great labor and effort by Shyam Sundar Das Adhikari. Prabhupada wanted to put that, see. On the day of Prabhupada's departure from London, he distributed some of his personal effects, such as sweaters and scarves, to his disciples. When he then went downstairs alone into the temple to see the deities, he offered fully prostrated obeisances on the floor for a long time and then stood, looking at Radha and Krishna. Yamuna. Prabhupada was looking at the deities with complete devotion. He loved those deities. He had commented about their exquisite beauty and how they contemplated each other. Complemented each other. Now, how sometimes Radharani looked more beautiful, but how Krishna's moon-like face and eyes were shining. Prabhupada saw me and matter-of-factly said, if you practice what I've taught you and follow the instructions of how I have taught you to worship the deity, and if you read the books that I have printed, it is sufficient for you to go back to Godhead. You need not learn anything new. Simply practice what I have taught you and your life will be perfect. Then he left, just left. Haribol. So Prabhupada came, with all these devotees. Devotees came, they worked so hard, and Prabhupada came, made this happen, this miracle. It was not an easy journey, looks like, being in London. So much achievement was done. And now Prabhupada, Shyam Sundar, he named, placed, what is that? Sign. The sign also, Radha Krishna Temple, which is constructed with great labor and effort by Shyam Sundar Das Adhikari. This is very nice. Hope you all like to. Would you like to meet Shyam Sundar Prabhu? I can try to schedule an conference. He's busy with, he may be busy with his books, but if you want, we can try. So, and Prabhupada felt very satisfied and offer prayer to the Lord Krishna. And he said that to Mother Yamuna, that if you practice that what I've taught you and follow the instructions of how I have taught you to worship the deity, and if you read my books, that's sufficient for you to go back to Godhead. That's all you need, Basically, that's an instruction for all of us also. So it's 8:45. I'm very grateful for everybody for joining. And there's one thing, those who have placed that for Janmashtami, there's a fundraiser has been created in website. So please, you can directly offer over there. Okay, thank you so much. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Prabhupada Lilamrt ki jai. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
So this might be the last night for me for a little bit because I'm heading out on vacation. But
We will miss you.
I'll-
How many?
I'll
How,
try
how
to
many?
join.
You'll
What's that?
try to join. How many days you're going for?
From I'm leaving. So we're going down to Delaware to Lewis tomorrow, and then leaving for North Carolina Saturday morning, and then we'll be back in probably be back in Delaware the following Saturday.
So almost 2 weeks. I mean,
Like a
10
full
days.
week. Like
Yeah.
I'll be back. I'll be back August 1st.
Okay,
So
nice.
I'm planning coming down there on August 2nd. So
Have a great trip, safe and happy trip. Hope you all had fun, good fun.
thank you. Yeah,
Rejuvenate and come back.
sounds good.
Hope I'll see you for
I'll see you
Janmashtami.
between then and now, though. But yep.
Yeah.
All right. Thank
Hare
you.
Krishna.
Hare
Hare
Krishna.
Krishna.